Howdy. Today we're going to continue the coding that we went to get to yesterday. Didn't actually get to any coding yesterday. It was mostly just looking around. This one I was able to go ahead and make a little progress on the code. And we'll see. Oh, there's the notifications. We'll see what code we can actually get to while I'm streaming. So without further ado, here we go. Again, this run ff0, if we just say this and look at our commands, our scripts, ff0, webx, there's the folder, does Firefox, opens browser console, that's the webx. So, let's just go ahead and also see. Probably won't keep it. We go back to the woman stealing her monitor for a little bit. If we look at WebEx, there you go, Mozilla WebEx. It's very nice. So far, so good. So check that out. It's for making add-ons for Chrome and Firefox. Okay, so here's, we're on the Bootstrap page. So we'll look at see. No. So also, most of these are the little thing where it does a manual, so it shows you the description of what it is. No, but anyway, there it is. Also try out new positioning shortcuts. Got to be on HTTPS, remember? It uses the crypto library for hashing, just hashing. So, there we go. There's the air conditioner kicking on again. I'm just going to keep mentioning that the first time it does, my voice starts to crackle with this. I got my air set at 78 here. We have this huge drought in Texas right now. We did finally get some rain yesterday for the first time in several months, but yeah, so anyway, let's go to the Bootstrap page. So this here's the raw Bootstrap. So remember when we started up, this is a new profile, so there's no local data. ibgib stores data locally in IndexedDB when you're on the web, because it's for distributed computations, for decentralized. So it created a new space for us. This one right here is a pointer to the most recent version. Did we decide it does this? Yeah, it did. So right here, I'm not sure if I even mutate spaces right now in this implementation. So anyway, so this may not change, but there's the hash. This is the space generated UUID. If you notice, it's the same as this. It's the space ID, same as this. Default space ID is 73. If we go down here, we can add a space. So added a space, it added here. This is the space ID. It's not the default. So the space ID here, this is a known list, but we can have any relation that we want. And so we just track the space by the ID, not by its gib hash or not by a temporal junction point. But if you don't know what those are, don't worry about it. Watch the previous video or ask in the comments. I'll be glad to explain it over and over. Temporal junction points, very important, like a stream ID. So here's a space ID. We index into, it's a named link to this other space. So there's our space B. Okay, so the code that I was doing today, we'll just put it down here. I've stopped worrying about having the best commit messages because it's just me working on it. I've been working a long time on it, so but we're working on it. We've made progress on the importing of the space, loading from IndexedDB and for validation. So we go over here and look at the code. This is what I've been working on mostly, this import space. It's right here. It's a click handler for when we go down here for this in this import space from storage, right? So we're on the web and we the capacitor file system stores things in IndexedDB. So it goes through and it adds different items. It's just a hack for a browser in there. See, there's a folder ibgib, that's my base directory. We have the default space is the 0 space, and then each space itself has like its own folder. But again, it doesn't have to store it in a folder. It's not that kind of file system where it's just a hierarchy. You don't have to have a file system, it's just a hierarchy. So in the far future, we won't have to do that. But we go here to meta. So there's itself. There's a little icon, and I just have it to where it shows the space ID now. I should have that show the space name. So let's go change. Just to finish what I was saying though, when you hit this import, or when you hit these buttons, right now it's throwing an error. Oh, we should definitely turn on DevTools with this new. Yeah, I'm not sure. You probably didn't see any of that. Huh? Since the layout's not that important, this will. And I forgot here, we want to do this also. Okay. So when you click on one of these items, if it's a folder, it navigates into the folder. If it's a space, it adds a space. Okay, so here, if it's this, it navigates up the current path. It's like the current working directory. If it's a space, we're going to import it. Although really, we should probably just select it. And then when we click the import space, yeah, that's probably what should happen. So we'll go down here. This is where I have the browsing info. Let's say now. So now when we select a folder, it navigates inside it. We want to, when we click on one of these things, it tries to import it. Imported. So we should show that, hey, that's already imported. But we just want to select it, and then when we hit the import space, it'll look for the selected one. Local spaces. All right. So we're in the import space accordion now. These are the accordions. We're in here. So I usually try to keep it on one page, not bouncing on everything. So I think this is what we're trying to go to here. There's two different cases. So, oh, it has two. Oh. Or if it's a platform. Platforms use actual files. The web uses IndexedDB, so we got to handle them slightly differently. The platform uses this hidden file picker to pick the file. We'll implement that later. The main driving use case right now is on the web. So here doesn't do anything. So there's still already a debugger there. We don't know if that's selected or not. We don't have a visual indicator, right? And this, I'm still an awful UI person, so we're inside of this thing right here. Class, file, folder, item. So we need to have a CSS applied depending on some Boolean. Wow, I just ended up copying it from somewhere else. Let's see if it can see that CSS, or we don't have to implement that now. Nope. Let's see what I have. On the ibgib page. Wackadoodle. Yeah, so you got to handle it differently depending on. Let's see what the formatting does there. Just until we get this going. We'll default it. Oh no, we'll just. There we go. That's sort of what we want. We're showing that little background there. Why is it just showing that little background? What's the actual CSS looking at? Just the background color. Is this one of those? What? Ooh, okay. Oh, it's because of the Vim is turned off right now for GitHub because there's a bug. Well, I'm on a light. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Item. What did I do? That was weird. Background. Background color. What the hell? NG class for shadow parts. First. Okay, so not crazy. Definitely red right there. I don't know how to dynamically change the shadow parts. So we'll just do, instead of the backgrounds. Oh, wait. This is all we need to do. Try that. Nope. No shadow parts. Yeah, we'll go with that. Hmm. Well, maybe we'll just do this. This is already switched to media query. Can you go to the definition of that? No. Okay, so this is already switched to the media query. I'm going to go back here, take away our not on the selected, because we just added that not for debugging purposes. So now we go in here. There we go. That's not ideal. What is the thing that has the full? Oh, right, because we're doing the background. Are you sure we can't? Maybe we can just do it here. Okay. Yeah, we can do it on. We'll just do the border. Don't worry about the shadow parts. There we go. So that means it's a visual indicator that it's selected. In fact, if we go back, the default space that has multiple spaces, we should be able to select multiple spaces. Not for that one. Okay, so now when we hit import space, so now there should be items that are selected, multiple items. See if the debugger will work. The last two should be selected true, selected false, or it's not even going to be there. Okay. So now we have a couple of these thingies that have, oh geez, selected true. Okay, sweetie. So now, got our visual indicator. Is where we want to be. I just default to using for loops now instead of the for of and for in, and definitely not for each because I use so much async. It's hard to remember which one does the async, which one doesn't, blah, blah, blah. A regular old for loop handles async inside of it. So yeah, my memory's not too hot. That also means you can't chain things together, like do a filter and then iterate over it using, asynchronously. But, there we go. I'm a very defensive programmer. Immediately I think, well, what if it's not a space? What if I screw something up over there and or somebody else does later? And anyway, we're not going to be too defensive on this one. Space infos. Okay, we'll be a little defensive. One of the things I do is I put these GUIDs. You can't see that, my finger. I put these GUIDs on log things and errors and whatever. It just helps me search through the code to find it more easily. So this is a snippet, throw new GUID, new error with GUID. If you look at the Ionic snippets, I think this is in, no, not that one. There we go. Yeah, it's not gray, so it's in the version control. So here's some of my snippets. The main ones I use are logging. I use this return early quite a bit. Oh, what the hell? So you see here, using syntax highlighting, sometimes when you return early in a function, it's good to know that you're returning early. So, like this one, that one wasn't so obvious. This one, ensure directories. I have a lot of vertical space, so these functions look longer than they probably should be. But here, I'm returning early, so the control flows, you can see that with syntax highlighted on this, you can see that sort of jumps out at you. Oh, returns early, and returning early. So anyway, oh, that's actually one we are using. There you go. But so the other one, if log, but so this is one I was just using there. So there's nothing that says, 32 characters of random hex. So anyway, it's a little ugly, but the main thing is it throws a new error, and then you can type whatever the error is, and then it adds on this E whatever. So now when I go and there's an error, I don't necessarily have to know what line it is. I can just go through the code and search for that, whatever the info is. So and then when I don't expect something, I put this little unexpected tag. Oh, shit. I've never done that one. Because this is more like, it's not like there's an error here. This is a sort of like an assumption or an assertion. And then a lot of times, well, for these, I'll just so it's kind of like an assertion. And then you'll notice here, I just leave that off. That's ridiculous. How many, you look down here, there's another thing a lot of people would have a hissy on. It's all the way over to column 166. But really, the way you read this when you're looking at code is if blah, 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 then throw some error. And then if you really want to see what that is, you can do word wrapping, right? You can just hit, in my case, it's Alt W. Vertical space. So what we want to do is okay. So now, oh, well, we're in the wrong one. We should be down here in the web. Here's another thing, handle click import space web. So I know there's religious wars about being idiomatic and that sort of thing. You know, if you're in JavaScript, you're supposed to use camel case, but really I use a combination of both. I use camel case for the main whatever term. And then if it's like a, you know, sometimes I'll say handle import space click, but it's sort of like a variation on click. So it's just a little bit easier. You know, tastes will differ on that kind of stuff. If you're at such a large project to where you have to lock that down, you know, maybe you're bigger than the pizza party scale, and maybe you're a little too big. And that's what this is all about. So this is about decentralized programming, distributed programming. It's more like sovereign for the programmers. So you can have your opinions on your code, but you also humble yourself and don't go so large to where scale gets out of hand. But I won't go off on a diatribe or anything. That's just what we're aiming for here. So anyway, click handler, all that stuff, just to get to the point of just iterating through our selected items. I think I renamed this, refactored it. What did I name that to? Browse infos. Okay. I was wondering if it refactors over here. Yes. Okay. Okay, so now we can go look at what I was doing earlier today with the actual import space code. So because I'm doing some assumptions here, we're just assuming that we're like attaching a space. So I realized I should be able to export, assuming I can get to the relatively recent file system, figure out how to use the recent file system APIs. I should be able to export individual ibgib graphs, right? So what that means is that if I have so let's go over here and just look at an ibgib. We'll go to the tags. Oh, whoops. Where did I change that active button? Is that because I have encapsulation off? No. Then what in the world? Oh, because I put it here for a debug. Little pink box up here. No more pink box. Hey, no more pink box. Okay. So any one of these, we'll take this, well, tags is a special index, so maybe that's not a good one to look at. But so this is a single point in the DAG. So in the storage substrate, it keeps individual points of time, keeps these little nodes in the graph. These things in the relations. So these are the named links to other nodes, right? Named relation ancestor. This is a primitive, so that's not actually stored anywhere. Named relations DNA. Here is the DNA array, because each of these is a one-to-many. It's always a one-to-many. One-to-one doesn't really exist, but we won't start that religious war. So this DNA points to these other things. This points to the other thing. The past of this, this will have its own relations. This thing has its own relations. The transforms don't have any other relations, but we don't have to know that. The point is that it's kind of like tree shaking. So with tree shaking, you can see which nodes are touched. Usually in the case of tree shaking, you're talking about compiling. So you need to know, which lines of code are actually going to get hit by the compiler. Assuming you don't have some convention over configuration thing that magically links things together. But so that tree shaking, that's getting, you can think of this large graph, and you're creating a projection of it, a slice. So in this case, we're creating a slice that is the universe of this tag favorite ibgib, right? It's the universe of this thing. So that whole graph, we call it a dependency graph. We should be able to export that. And what we'll actually do is we'll create one large ibgib. We won't shard it. We won't break it up for right now. So we'll keep, build this large dependency graph. I already have, you can look at the code here. It's in ibgib's service, which is this gigantic service, partly because it's a pain to get services in Angular to break them down because of how the dependency injection works for hierarchies, for abstract hierarchies. But anyway, so in here we can, right? So, oh, that's right. It's just a wrapper now. The actual thing I have abstracted into the space. Sometimes these links in the comments have problems. Anyway, it doesn't really have a problem. But anyway, so you get this dependency graph for an incoming list of ibgib or ibgib addresses within a single space. So this is not working among multiple spaces, and then you have a bunch of other parameters. It uses this gotten because it calls this recursively. So it builds up this aggregating list of ibgibs that are in that dependency graph. So it recursively calls it. It's a rather large, unwieldy. It's not that big. We're looking at it. Yeah, it's not that bad. Like I said, I personally have a lot of vertical space, and also this thing, for validation, you got a bunch of validation crap. Not crap. You should always have good validation. Very key. But so basically, it goes to this thing. It looks at all the directly related nodes. So a node like I think graph terminology, they call it a distance of one. So it looks at all of its, directly adjacent neighbors, and recursively builds up, this list of address. And then it goes to that neighbor and says, okay, neighbor, what neighbors do you have? That's what it is. So. Okay, so what I was saying is that we'll be able, that's the next thing I want to work on is exporting and importing from that kind of graph. Okay, so later you want to have it generic between two spaces. In this case, we're talking about going from an internal space where we track metadata to an external space, which is like a file system. A file system is a type of, off-chain graph that we don't have metadata on. So we're going to export that just whole big graph. We're going to put it inside of another ibgib because ibgib is just a natural, it's like the one thing that we do. We have a bunch of, machinery for it. And then we're going to, save or export that ibgib. It's going to be a disconnected ibgib, completely self-contained ibgib. It's just one gigantic file of all of these other ibgib records. So that'll give us the ability to export large chunks or slices of spaces. But this particular import of a space is really just attaching an already existing space that's just disconnected. So, because like I said, if I screw something up when we push something out, and then for some reason when it boots up, remember when we started this up, we quit out of this. So if I'm over here, that we don't really care about. Okay, when we execute this, at the very beginning, if it doesn't find a bootstrap ibgib, there we go. That's what. Like I said, I'm practicing these new shortcuts. Oh yeah, that's one reason I have to do it. See, so it popped this up because it couldn't find a local space. Right. It couldn't find, right now it's initializing because it can't find a space. It's creating the space. It's creating a couple, these basic tags, default tags. But so now it has a space. Now it has a bootstrap. It has a space. It knows, it knows where it is. But if we go add a space and then manually remove it from the bootstrap, we're going to go over here. IndexedDB, file storage. It's probably still too small for you to see. One of these first ones, like the seventh one or something, right here, bootstrap. If we delete this, right? So we just deleted the bootstrap and then reload. It's not going to have a pointer to that space we created. So if I screw something up and it can't find, if I changed the bootstrap itself, right? Not quite sure why it wasn't there. But so here's newer space. And now what we want to be able to do is import it, because it's still going to find our AAA, our first one, or first two, right? So go down here. And now we should be able to select this thing and import it. Although again, I need to have the name of the thing in there. Zoom back in here. It's hard to tell what the stream can see. So I'm just changing, it's showing. So here, info.name. We'll do what do I have? Space gym, space ID, but I want the space name also, which is the space ib. Ah, that's what I did. I created a label, but I haven't done that. That's right. Okay. So now instead of doing the ternary there, we're going to do a label. And then can you do the null coalescing? Yeah. Although really, if you have an empty label, I don't want to do that. So do the old school null coalescing, the or. Okay, so now say that. What did I just change in here? Oh, the refactor. Let's see. So now let me just go in here, default space, I'll have all of them. Okay, so now it's showing the ib, which has, it's a witness, a space, ionic space, that's class name. This is the schema that we're using per use case, right? Per use case, this is the schema, and one of these is the name, right? So we know, oh, okay, we already have newer space. I'm not going to worry about excluding one that we already have linked. So this one really, you don't need to import newer space because it's already there. So this one probably shouldn't even show up, or, that's finesse there. Don't care about this point. So, but we definitely want to be able to import these two. And so now, well, what happens if we just click, what'll be, huh. So there, I looked for it via just the beginning of that error tag. So, and if you want to generate one just without using if you remember, this thing right now is generated by the snippet. But if you just want to generate one, this is from, it's Control Shift P is on mine, but you can insert GUIDs very easily. I do the one 5. If right here is 5 with the 5th option. And I think that's one of my few extensions that we have. Insert GUID. What a good name. Okay. All right. Okay. So are we telling it that it's got a space when we add it? Toggling selected, yeah. His space is true. Well, and we're filtering. Okay, let's just see what's. Did we not? Selected true. Why is this? Oh, because I'm not iterating the space infos, right? info equals, okay, so silly me, losing concentration. I'm sure I'll get used to coding while streaming. Where is that at? 9305. Well, see, there you go. Our defensive coding came in handy with the insertion. Probably should take that out later. Okay, so right now, again, it's only one space right here in the space IDs array. Okay, no more silly billies. Okay, so here's the code that I was wanting to check. I'm always doubtful of whether F10 actually works. Okay, so this space, we only have one item in our little browser here, right? One item, but a space is a timeline and it may have multiple items. So we actually keep track of when we add the spaces right here, when we're adding that folder info, that browse info. It looks like I undid or I haven't refactored this one. When we add that browser info, that little entry into our browser, we really are just tracking timelines. So a space timeline. So we actually add for the first frame, or really the first file that we come across, we add the whole new spiel. But if we already have that space, then we're just adding one more file name in the timeline. And then what we're actually going to do is we're going to verify all of the space timeline. So for instance, raw okay, so I'm copying that. We'll duplicate this. I gotta get to where I can just navigate to it with the mouse. So many things to do. So we just navigated anything in this ibgib slash whatever the address is, and then we navigate to whatever that address is. So right now, this thing is already up to n equals 54. So really, there's 55 files for this one space. Let's see if I'm right on that. So here is the info. So it found 52. I did say 54, right? Why did it only find 52? That's a little mystery. Should be 53, including the first entry is 53. So we're missing one. Maybe the first one doesn't get added. Maybe the first one is before the ID is in the ib. Let's go see. Nope. So right now I'm just, so each one of these is a timeline. The very first one that we make, so every time we add one of those indexes, I went over the last video, but every time we add something to like the tags, like these things on the left are indexes basically that keep track of some special thing in our space. So robots have their own index, roots have their own index, tags has their own index, and those kind of configuration things get stored in the space ibgib itself. That's how we do configuration. There's no separate configuration file. It's an ibgib. It gets attached to somewhere. In this case, they get attached directly to the space ibgib because that seemed like it made sense. But so this very first one should be. We'll see what the n number is in there. Wrong one. So gib data relations. Okay, we're interested in the. We'll just do a quick macro. It works if there's no comma inside there. Oops. What do we do here? Did I not? Well, that's weird. Anyway. And 28. So this is what we were looking for, this n right here. So what, are you kidding me? I can't expand that further? Oh, that's lame. What about the last one? So now that you see what I was doing there, I'm just going to do a n21. So those are just random, or it's deleting them. Let's see. Can we select items? Nope. Wheel. think you could filter the content. All right, well, I'll work on that later. The point is it's a timeline, and this thing is actually showing just one for the very first one. So each one of these things, so this AAA is this timeline that has, you know, not a ridiculous number, but a lot of permutations whenever the local space gets updated. Okay. So basically we want to, again, this is what it looks like. Nope. So this is a pointer to the most recent one. It changes when that space changes. Although that right there, that does not have a temporal junction point. Let me see what happens if I you don't have that description. So we've just changed this tags index, which has changed the space. So right now it's 857. Why is that not? I guess it doesn't have a temporal junction point. Is that really? It's got a timestamp and the end counter, but it has no TJP relation here. Not quite sure if I made that design decision, why it doesn't have a temporal junction point. Why would I have thought that? Maybe I wanted to change it, but technical debt. I think it's because I was creating this manually. That's what it is. It doesn't have a temporal junction point because it's a special thingy, and I probably created it. Yeah, I know I created it manually without using the factory. Okay, so the space, this local space doesn't have a temporal junction point. It was just is a convenience. It still has something where the in is the lowest and the highest. So goes through. Just some validation. Oh. How long are we looking at here? Oh, old man time. Oh, we're over an hour. Well, we'll do a little bit more. So I'll do those later. The main thing is somewhere I have a so we want to get the most recent space and then call this function that's going to update the bootstrap. So the way it works internally is like when we change this tags index, it changes the tags index to a new ibgib as a new pointer, and we just call this function to update the bootstrap to reference that new pointer, right? So that's how that works. So here we can just instead of doing a reduce, it's just so much easier just to use the old-fashioned for loops. Since this is not asynchronous, we can do a for each because it's slightly more concise. But again, you got to be careful if you're doing anything asynchronous not to use for each. Um, more defensive programming. And it may get annoying to some people I have this word ibgib all over the place, but um, it was a necessary neologism because right now we're using files and folders, and that just ain't good enough. So usually the convention is that if I'm talking about an ibgib, I'll talk about the ibgib. If I'm talking about the timeline, I'll try to say ibgib timeline or just timeline. If I'm talking about the pointer to the ibgib, like a reference, I'll say address, adder, ADDR, or ibgib adder. Um, okay, so we're just going to go through all of the ibgibs for, so here we iterated through all the space file names for the info. So again, that one, this entry right here, or right here, or right here, these three spaces, these are actually timelines. You got to think of, we're tracking the entire timelines of things that change. So like if you were tracking an object and every change in that object, kind of like Redux stuff, how they have transforms, they get applied to the states, but it still keeps track of all the states. You can scrub forward, you can scrub backwards. It's the same kind of thing. In fact, this is very would benefit from that kind of UI probably. I definitely want to have a scrubber. Um, we'll actually have scrubbers of trees of ImageNet, and you start seeing, life as timelines. Uh, so that metaverse thing becomes interesting. But so this is a timeline right here, and this info has every single discrete frame in that timeline. So we want to get the most recent, the last one of that timeline. So I guess we could do a sort. Yeah, that's actually probably maybe we should do that. Sort X. Oh, but then we have to give it a sort function, and it doesn't just work, I don't think. Well, let's see if it just sorts. Um, Sort works in place, I believe. Sorts an array in place. Compare function. Oh, that's right. It's an AB. And then we're just guessing. Mm, mm, no, why is that not working? Oh, I'm just guessing which one's -1 and which one's +1. So But that's annoying down there. Let's get used to moving that more frequently. Okay. Uh, hmm, hmm. Capitalization. There we go. That'll also keep it in memory for the debugger. So again, this bootstrap only has one space, the newer space. We're going to be importing, this default space has all of them, importing the AAA one, import. So here, import the space. We're using the zeros because again, we're thinking that this thing already lives correctly in the directory structure. We're just attaching it to the bootstrap. So we can just use the zero space because remember, a space is a bucket that has ibgibs. It has an so just using the machinery instead of manually loading from JSON file, the JSON index DB entry. We're just using the space machinery already in place. So we get the address from the file name because the file name is the address.json. Okay, so so our adder looks correct. Oh, no, because when I say that, I mean just the gib, which is the hash, that's some of the metadata. That's the hash part of the metadata. You know, this file from text, it has what the ib is, the gib, the data, and the relations. So, you know, it does the crypto form, the version of that, or a portion of that, I mean, where it actually takes the hash of the ib, concatenates that with the hash of the data map. These are all JSON strings, concatenated with the hash of the relation map. And then all three of those things together create the final total hash for which becomes the Pontilier gib. So if you want transform, or this is in a base tsgib library that's on GitLab. So we go over here to GitLab. Is that going to be nice to us? Yes. So here's the base library where it just does the graphing part. Just. So here's some more basics for the engine stuff. Metadata. So for these hash the relations and hash that whole thing to get a single hash. lives here in the get gib and transform helper. So the thing is or not, it's adding to a timeline or not. You get the gib by passing it into this function, which here's that stuff in code. It does it differently if it has a temporal junction point or not. So first, this is the SHA-256v1. It's a terribly named thing where I'm talking about. By default, primitive for hashing. So there's no salt. So here it is. Some of them have relations, some of them have data. Chasing string-fied relations, data, hash to hex, chasing string-fied data. And then relations and data. Now, this is just for this first part. Decisions on how exactly to get that. You can just data for it's just right now, it's just convention by configuration. Whatever that is. The first one, it does its thing, and then later we have a forward-looking mechanism for allowing for the expansion. Okay, so another basic stuff. We'll undo that. Okay. You start here. You start here. There's our raw, still has just the one, newer space. Ibgib. Default. Meta. AAA July 15. Selected. Import space. Okay, we get the ibgib itself. It's going to do it for each of these file names. We're going to end up taking out that debugger. Where is this? 459 on Bootstrap. Oops. There, we're going to take that out. And then just for fun here, so right here is a log for, I gotta move that faster. Uh, we don't need to do that. We can. Okay, so now we can filter for that GUID, and what we're going to do is that problem we were having before of the n equals 54, 52, 51, we'll be able to do that. In fact, we'll do this not here, but after it's sorted. Sweetie. And then I have it as a helper function. This pretty is that's just syntactic sugar for that line, which is pretty printing for it. You know, really, I just care about the data. I want to see what. No, I want to see the whole thing. Although we could, why not just do both? Just, you know, it's probably at one of the bookends or other. It's either going to be at the 0 or the most recent 52 or whatever. One or two ibgibs are going. So, restart one more time. Look in here, one ibgib, newer space, import our 0 space, in the meta, AAA, select that one, import it. Okay, let's probably going to be a error import space. This is undefined. That's interesting. Oh. This out. Raw. What's this? Just a second. Let's just see what this does first. Newer space. Import debugger. This is undefined is still happening. Nothing to do with that. So somewhere in here, I'm using a helper file that as of this. So we're going to dismiss me. Okay. You gonna get my hmm? You hungry? Say hello. Oh, just a second, sweet. Okay, Olive. Give me a few minutes here, sweetie. No. Ah, okay. So I added this validate function inside the ionic space, but it's not inside of an object. It's just there. Uh, no, what's it called again? Validate. You know, I can just go to that one. Also, this you'll see this LC a lot. This stands for log context. It's so pervasive. I use a very small variable name. Usually, I don't like small variable names, but like as you see with the for each and the filters with just using X, that's a convention. And also this LC, that's log context that I had all over the place. Um, yeah, this is mm, still in the function. Okay, right out of the function. Okay, know where this is. What I was saying is with this file system, there's no way to check to see if a file doesn't exist or not because of, I guess maybe they're of the exception flow camp. I'm not a big fan of that, but you know, different strokes. Programming is hard. Okay, so we'll reload this. It's already centered in my screen. It's a bit easier. Okay, we're all almost puppies. Yamero. All right. Select. We go down here. We don't need to pause in the exception, but we will do this. Okay, we've gotten there. We've gotten that far. Okay, we've gotten that far. Validation errors. Oh, interesting. Undefined class name. Maybe this is the first one. This was. Doesn't it have class name? They don't have class name. Does this not have class name? No, it does not. Do I have the class name in there? No, I do not. All right, minor thing. I think I added that later for witnesses, so I just have it in the ib. So yeah. Careful about it. Yeehaw. Hey, import this. So that's times. It's looking like I may have to do this later. Still only one. Ah, gosh, that's by now the debugger will be pretty rock solid. So there is a slight difference in one of them that has n equals 0. Relation cannot be populated if data. So what is the past? N equals 0. Hmm. Oh, interesting. So none of those have that. So that could be where our missing sucker is. Okay. Or irregardlessly, however you say it. So anyway, that's a little fun coding, I guess, on this streaming. So kind of weird just talking to myself later, and hopefully I'll be able to just import this, and then maybe I'll work on the file system import, and then I got to do export imports and get back to something fun because I really need my robots to work better. So right now, the robots, it's it's not too simplistic. I mean, it was awesome to get something in place, but and then here, go into one of these. One use case for this for me personally is foreign language learning. So it's pretty, okay, German, okay, um, you know, sort of understand it, can sort of speak things. So you should be able to just take whatever this is. Right, so we'll go over to sport. So di vuole contatti ora, so talking about his contract situation, Dybala, pretty good player for Juve. Oh, but you can't see this stuff. I think, can you see any of the things? Not without a license or whatever it is. Copy something or other. Right, so whatever this is, for learning purposes, right? So you can go inside that. So now that's our context is inside that. You add another one, add another one. So the way it works though is that we go over here to robots. Kind of like that. So he has seen this comment. So all of this is DLT, DAGs stuff. Here's the comment, Adam, Nicola Zagno. So we know this is the comment that we just added. But so if we're somewhere and we want him to quote unquote join the conversation, so somewhere talking, blah, 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 whatever our context is, doesn't have to be in a robot. And so we're here doing something, and we say, oh, Randy, what's up? So this could be the classroom or quote unquote classroom. So it picks one of the things that he's seen at random. So it's like a tag, but it's a little bit more proactive. But there's multiple ways that's getting this thing to be smarter because eventually, like you do Duolingo, right? those kinds of things. I've tried a million of those different ones. And the problem is simply scale. You cannot read enough in the game. But use different approaches. So you can use like a bag of words and reinforce things. So just a little bit to help you to where it's what you already know, but and other things like that. Use what you learned, and the strength of your memory traces. If you know anything about super memo or but but something that actually scales. So it's easier to dynamically make flashcards. So this whole thing, I'm not going to break this up into single word flashcards. You should be able to say, no, fuck you, no, this one. No, fuck you. Okay, that means to um, and then bring it back to and if we had more people working on this, people taking this thing there. Well, those things more dynamically with the things that you're interested in, and so or subjunctive. So there are definite like learning improvements we can make. You don't have to be as simplified as Duolingo. Once you build the ibgib, like you would have other people create these apps, and you send these slices. Would be like a game reinforcement, to use your vocabulary or your shared vocabulary with somebody else. So if you have a group of 10 people, there's going to be cross sections of this that have a good memory trace of these words. We're building up a 10% new word rate, and learning that we can do now, but no one college and you go to a class and feel it's like that's not the way we can have dynamic dynamic learning, decentralized and distributed learning. So less so you have a parent or a student teacher relationship, and more it's just you're all exploring things, and this is just in the foreign language with respect to foreign languages. The same thing applies to science, where you have different labs and you can have actual reproducibility um, more fine-grained reproducibility. Anyway, I don't want to go off. The point is, the next thing I want to work on is a slightly less naive robot or chatbot. So this chatbot's pretty cool. Taken 20 years to make, but exports, we're going to be hopefully looking at a fancier robot. So, oh look, do a little transition here. There we go. Yeah, look at that transition. So anyway, if you made it this far, congratulations, you're the big winner. Yeah, let me know in the comments or some other mechanism, and yeah, we'll get this going. So thanks for watching.